Hello and welcome back to my channel. My name is David Novak. I have three distinct purposes for this video, which may be more or less realized depending on how it goes. Earlier this morning I did the Memento Mori video. I was not feeling all that well and felt that it came out somewhat garbled. The purpose for doing which was because I wanted to quit thinking about it. Well, of course, I did not quit thinking about it. That sort of thing doesn't work. So any subsequent thoughts which I may have had may pop in here. The bigger reason was a couple of videos that I've seen recently by booktuber Matt Wall about self-publishing. And when it comes to being an artist, making it in the world, I don't think there is any better font of information, if that's the right word, font or fount of information, than Matt's channel. And I would suppose some of his other, I want to say clubs or things that require memberships where you get the special perks behind the scenes. I sorely wish that Matt had been around in the days that I was attempting to get my publishing company off the ground. So I want to talk a little bit about that. And then the ultimate purpose was, I mentioned offhandedly, talking about the poetry of John Keats, that where you start with Keats makes a difference. And it had never occurred to me before that where a reader starts with my work makes a difference as well. Now, I am not a good judge of what I have written, and I've had tremendously little feedback for the most of it. That's pretty usual for writers, I think. So I thought I would talk a little bit about each book and let you know where it kind of fits. But first, let me read something that Matt said. Now, I got this from the transcript of his video. I will link a couple of his videos below. You assume being a writer is the same thing as being a self-published author or a self-published poet or a self-published writer, whatever. You are missing the key word in self-publishing, which is publishing. That is a business, okay? Publisher is somebody who outs stuff out. That doesn't sound right, but you can click on his video, and then markets it, maybe puts stuff out and then markets it to the right audience to sell books, okay? If you don't want to do any of that, now here the transcription does not give the word, it gives you a parentheses. So if you don't want to do any of that, I'm going to assume it's a word that starts with an S that I just said, then you're just a writer, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's just you're going to need to find somebody to publish your books, okay? Because it's like publishing isn't just hitting publish on Amazon or like creating a listing on Etsy. You need to actually promote your, another parentheses, I also believe the S word. You also need, you need to actually promote your S, build your audience, market the, and here I think it's an F, market the out of yourself, cultivate your fan base. You know, like there's a lot to it. It's not just putting your books up. So if all you've done is put your books up, tell your friends, maybe some of your family, put a couple of posts on Instagram or I don't know, or AM, or on Facebook, and are just sitting there twiddling your thumbs waiting for the sales to come in, it's not going to happen. As I say, I wish that Matt had been around when I needed him. I am now in the retirement phase of my career. I don't expect to do any more writing. This board is sort of precarious here, so if somebody jumps up or down, it may collapse everything. And also this filming device is on a little table that nobody ever climbs upon, or if they do, it's to upturn the whole thing because it's kind of spindly. It may or may not happen. Let's hope for the best. So my earliest books, let's start with them. It is these 5. I'll give you the sides to them. And this was in the day before print on demand existed. And I, first off, wanted to rush out my book, The Requiem, because it was a big book. It was the be all and end all for me. I thought I was done with writing at that point. It turned out it was not so. So that was the book that I rushed out into print. This book, Against Holy War, came later. It's the book that brought me back into writing again. And so during the time of these first 5 books, I was doing all the things. I was going to the Poetry Fest. I was going to different venues to give readings, to sign books. I think a couple of different Barnes and Nobles had me. They were very open to that sort of thing. And it really was getting a business off the ground, a lot of hard work. You had to deal with the distributors, Ingram and the other one. I don't remember much about this anymore. So this book came out in the year 2000. It came out in 1999, but I delayed the copywriting of it because I thought that the year 2000 was something special. That's when you are starting off on things, you think all kinds of weird, fanciful things, which, if you are lucky, you live long enough, you are able to correct some of these errors. So one of the problems I said with approaching the work of Keats was if you just jump right into the Eve of St. Agnes, or even possibly his odes without any sort of experience with poetry or with his poetry, it can be done, to be sure. But as I said, the first time I read the Eve of St. Agnes, or even any of the odes, it was hard work for me. Whereas when becoming introduced to a poet's work, there usually are some poems that are easier than others. So in all cases, I showed my 3 lovely Penguin complete editions of Keats, Blake, and Donne. And in all cases, there are easier poems at the fore. When you start writing, you tend to write shorter things. And so with Keats, Keats is a special case, though. I recommended in the video talking about him that you start possibly with the sonnets before you jump into the heavier stuff. But with that, if you really have the gumption to do so, you probably can do it. Any of the stuff. But I was completely wiped out with the Eve of St. Agnes. Now with Blake in the complete things, you've got his early Songs of Innocence and Songs of Experience, and then you go into his prophetic books and whatnot. And that's much harder. So if you began there, it would be really difficult. And then with Donne, it also starts with, I think, songs, and then you move into some, God, now I forget what they're called, elegies maybe, and those are a bit longer, but they're a good step up from the songs. He also has, I think, some sonnet sequences and stuff, which I don't particularly recommend as a starting place. But so I thought, well, in my case, I should tell people which are the easier books and which aren't. Now, these five, of course, I would recommend you start with somebody's earlier work, just because it's probably easier. So, excepting possibly the Requiem, if you are not adept at reading long poems, this is 404 pages, you might have a hard time with it, and so I don't recommend it. Something like this is after the Twin Towers in New York came down via an act of terrorism on September 11th, I felt that the appropriate response was a peaceful one, or should have been a peaceful one, and I wrote a book to that effect. So this ultimately became my bestseller at fairs and fests because each poem is about 8 lines long. It's very short, and there's a lot of white space on the page, and that I think my rule of thumb is that white space sells. Unfortunately, my career has not gone that way. But the very first book that I did is this one. It's just short little lyrics, from 8 lines to 36 lines or something like that. All probably pretty easy. The earliest ones, while I was just getting my sea legs, so to speak, learning how to write. And so the very first sonnet I ever wrote is in there. If I ever do a video about sonnets, I can talk about it. It has problems. But this is really where the most growth was occurring in my writing career. This finally came out when I was about 30. And it really covers a lot of ground. I'm sure the earliest poems in there are from when I was a teenager. I had to scour all of my manuscripts to bulk out a book of this brevity. And then I did a book of sonnets, and it's had some criticism because I was big into these and thous, not using the right pronouns. That's one thing you're going to have to deal with, actually, with any of my books. Later works less, but I still like to, or at least at the very latest, I don't really write anymore, but I still liked to slip into that mode at times. And then, so this book is where I started bulking it out into long poems, and it's about 179 pages. It's got, I think, 70. Oh, now it's 76 poems, I think, and it's longer poems go anywhere from, I don't know, 28 lines to 4 times that, maybe even more than that. And then that was the effort that was building me up to this big thing. Now, if you've read a lot of epic poetry and you if you've read a lot of epic poetry and you're comfortable with the form, then you might be able to break into this one. It's not, strictly speaking, an epic. It's just simply a long poem. Okay? So that was my self-publishing career. And actually, even by the time, they weren't published in the order that they were written. By the time, so I had been going to publish this one, then I put out the one responding to September 11th. And this one has quoted material in it, and it was a bear getting all of the permissions. And so I decided, even though I had really decided to quit publishing at that point, it was a lot of work and little reward. I mean, there were sales here and there, but I just had enough. But I decided to put this one out anyhow, because the effort, not to mention the fees that had to be paid to get permissions. Nowadays, were I to do it, I think I would just take what I needed, make a fair use argument, and if somebody wants to make an issue about a book that doesn't really sell any copies anyhow, well, then they can consider that. So I gave that up, and then it's got to be 10 years ago now. So that you're talking about, the first one was 99, so 4 years, so 2002, 2003. As I say, I was on the stump. I was doing the stuff, because back then it was not easy to get a book out. I mean, you had to work. You had to drum up funding for it. But I was able to. The juggernaut was moving, but I really got tired of it. And as Matt says in his video, you have to be out there hustling. Publishing is a business. And at some point I decided, well, I don't want to be a businessman. I don't want to serve two masters. And so I let that go. 10 years ago, print on demand had come into vogue. And I thought, well, I have all of these things. I might as well just put them out. I think by this point, most of it was accessible. In fact, it was. I had the stuff on old floppy disks, most of which I was still able to pull the stuff out from, and just stick them up at lulu.com. So for these first 5, if you want to start with these, you're going to have to go to Amazon or to some used book vendor to pick these up, or any of these up, or you could come to Chicago. I still have partial boxes, I think, of every title, more or less, and I could get them to you. But I'm really done with the publishing thing, the whole business of packaging things and mailing them off. That was back then. So I started putting things up on Lulu, and now I'm just noticing that I missed one. Let me go get it to be complete. Pardon my running away again. Okay, should have put that up there. So it's a thin book, 50 poems. This is actually a counterpart to this one. Now, I had decided, because I got the website and I had the X, I just decided to put the X into my name. I regret having done that at this point. Well, I don't regret it, but I regret that I can't correct it. It's really impossible for me to go back into the Lulu site and change everything. It's to do any of that kind of business work is not where I want to devote my precious remaining time these days. But so this I think was the first one that I put out on Lulu, and it's very short, very easy poems. The only caveat here is that there might be some unpleasantness in some of the poems. There might be some poems of something of an adult theme, so I would not particularly recommend it. But I think they are pretty easy poems. You might even find them to be too easy. Now this book, that one and this one were from the year 2002. And this book I actually have gotten some feedback on quite positively from somebody who read a fair number of these, and this was her favorite. It's longer poems, but nothing unmanageable. I mean, so there's the one I just opened up to was 6 pages long, so it's a poem that still will require a little bit of work. Now, I should point out, I'm not saying anything about the quality of these poems, however, just because one person told me that, you shouldn't trust that. Then I think this came out in 2003. Let me see. I mean, it was written in 2003. Yeah. So now, come on. No. Come on, dude. You know? Yeah, so 2003 was a crazy year for me. I think an awful lot of this all came out in 2003. And this it's, I think, 50 very short poems. There's a regrettable typo in here somewhere I remember coming across, and at this point I can't go back to correct it. It would be something you'd have to live with. You know, I found a template at lulu.com and just used photographs that were handy and made everything according to that template until Lulu made that template impossible. It's really not a great company, and so I try not to go in behind the scenes to touch anything, even to do a minor tweak. And of course, I don't have the Microsoft Word that would really help that out either. So the typo I can't fix. And these, you know, if you like the poetry of E.E. Cummings or something like that, you might be more amenable to this kind of thing. I liked the idea of just banging out these books. I was on a roll in 2003, and so I did. This is another one. This is much more traditional sort of stuff. Bestial ballads or bestial ballads. I don't know how you say that word exactly. But so you'll find poems dealing with specifically acts of human atrocity, I would say. Not exclusively that. But the poems here are probably as easy as you're going to find for getting into poetry. And then here's the condemnation. So after the invasion of Iraq started, I was condemnatory of the deed or of the act, and put out this. Well, as I say, the books didn't come out until later, but I wrote this. And it's all villanelles, which is a specific verse form. If you know the Dylan Thomas poem, "Do Not Go Gentle Into That Good Night," you know the most famous villanelle in English. And so it's I wouldn't say that I pulled them off with the mastery of Thomas. And so there can be sort of a wrenching experience, I would imagine, with the reading of the poems, because there's a lot of repetition. And so it's 100 poems. I like doing things in round numbers when I can. 100 poems against the war, basically. Now this book, again, follows suit on this one. Basically the same format, longer poems, and the only real difference between these two was I decided not to do any external quotation because getting the permissions had been so difficult. So I just eliminated that, unfortunately, because it was a really fun aspect of putting that first book together for me. As I say, now, were I to do it again, I might just do so and let the chips fall as they might. So also in 2003, I wrote another big poem. And so where this one was just a first-person story, I did this, I did that, I wanted to do something more, just telling a story about a main character. And so that's what happened here. A friend of mine had taken this picture. That's me as I looked back in the day, looking at a small edition of William Shakespeare. So again, this is another, and this one's a little bit longer than the other one. I said that one was 404 pages. This one clocks in at 442 pages. So that's one long poem. And this one, I believe that the first canto, a canto is just really a chapter, but for some reason when it's poetry, they call it a canto. The first canto, I think, was kind of wayward and unfocused and all over the place before finally at the end of that first chapter or canto the narrative story gets underway. So if you're good with epics, although I don't know, this is closer to being an epic than that, but I don't know if it yet fits the definition. But if you've got experience with that kind of heavy duty reading, then you might take a stab at this. But as a rule, I would not suggest it as a place to start. So these are the two biggies. I think I've had reason to show them before. And then I did another according to the style of these two. So these are three. And this I was going to call Hawaiian poems because I had the chance to go to Hawaii and I wrote some poems. It's not a bad back photo, really. We had a good time, I'm sure. But now I never reread any of this stuff, and so I would suppose that the poems in here are just sort of I don't know what the right word is, Karenish. I mean, I've since this time, I mean, at the time I wrote it, I thought, well, this is really interesting, and I have poems about Hawaii and stuff. And I realized that now it's real common for people in the white world, particularly, to travel to a place, Barbados or whatever, and then make a book about it. And so at the time, I was not aware that I was exercising my colonialist privilege or whatever, or my white privilege. But so indeed, I'm sure it was. So you get what you get. And then, as I say, I think this is still 2003. Yeah, this was just 100 poems slapped together because I wanted to work with a sort of form that was reminiscent of something in William Butler Yeats, though not at all like William Butler Yeats. And I wouldn't look at this. I don't know how. I mean, the poems are probably pretty easy to read. I don't know how good they are. You know, Matt Wall has talked about the artist, the writer. It's not his job to say what is good or what isn't. Rudyard Kipling famously threw away that famous poem. The title's always the one for the Jubilee. Lest we forget, lest we forget. And then he retrieved it, and of course it became a classic. And I think that was it for 2003. Yeah, so this I think came later, a few years later. And I have a separate video about this one. All of these poems are going to be pretty easy. I had a huge, cumbersome manuscript of poems that I just couldn't make any shape out of. So it's selected poems without any kind of a theme. Most of those others that I have shown you were conceived as complete books. So this is just sundry poems. And having Microsoft Word available last year, I decided to cull that old mass of pages and see what I could get out. I got very little out, so it's also a very small book, about 80. It has a page count of 84, so I'm going to guess it's 84 poems in there, something like that. So it's all over the place, but it's, again, just solitary poems that don't really have any commonality. So here's another collection of villanelles. Villanelles be what they be. This is one to stay away from, I think. It's actually made of 4 different books, 4 different parts. This one also has a bad typo or something where I missed a word. And I scoured the manuscript and could not find that particular poem. I wanted to correct it at the time and didn't. And this one has a nice photo of me on the back, as I once was too. This, God knows what that little podium was, but it was in the lobby of a hotel in Beijing. So, of course, this picture had to get taken. But as I say, it's not something that I would recommend. Small poems. I was putting little poems out online under the pseudonym I Am Small because I was really annoyed with current events. And it was just a wild effusion. These poems, if you want stuff that's real topical, the poems themselves are all probably pretty easy to read, but they're all going to be poems of protest. There I was in New York, just coincidentally. And then another book of villanelles. This one came out later. I mean, was written later. I keep saying came out when I mean was written, because God knows when all of these. Yeah, so 2009. So 2011 must be when I started to put things on Lulu, I would guess. So that's longer than I would have thought. But the thing is, the stuff on Lulu, while I wanted the stuff accessible, and that was why I put the X in the name, so that there would be a tie-in with the website, I really was not publishing them as Matt Wall makes the distinction. I was just having them accessible so that people who knew my work from those previous books could find them. And this is another collection of short sundry poems that I just put together. What year was it? 2014. So it's 10 years old now. I was sort of in the doldrums, and I wanted to feel like something was going on. So once again, I scoured all of my manuscripts and pulled out loose poems and put them into a short book. And my thing says it's got 60 pages, so it's very short. This is 100 poems, but they're very short. I think 8 lines a piece, and it's not something I've really looked at very much. When you are cranking things out, things that have a little bit more substance to them, you retain a little bit more memory of them. That I don't know. This I remember pretty well. These were poems at the start of the quarantine period in this country under COVID-19. And so it's just a small handful of poems. And I was not, by this point, I was not putting any effort into the publication. I just wanted it out there and available for people. By then I had gotten rid of the X from my name, and I for the back, I just used something from Lulu. You know, they offered this up as something that you could put on your book. So I just went with that. I was putting no work into anything by this point. Then getting into the more recent period, this is from 2021, so you're getting into more recent poems, and you're getting into a form called the ballade, which I really only had learned about not too long before deciding to do a book of them. And I don't think that anybody has really seen this poem that I've heard from. So I don't know what to tell you. But if you look up ballades, it was at one time a popular form. Dorothy Parker made the form famous, I think. But Chesterton and the other guy, Hilaire Belloc or whatever, they wrote ballades. And so it was just trying to see what I could do with the form. So again, you've got 100 poems in that form. I really should try to organize these. So Songs of the Nights falls within the period of when I was trying to become a reader. I read the Arabian Nights, which Penguin Books publishes in a 3-volume set. And I was just offhandedly writing Arabian Nights themed poems, and it was fun. It was a really enjoyable way to interpret that text. And so at the end of it, I put them all together into a book. And it's fairly short. Well, this comes up to 105 pages. Yeah, so short poems, easy poems, but all on a single theme. Then my last book, which is sonnets. So you can see I tend to return to things. My first dedicated book was a book of sonnets, that meaning to say not just loose poems assembled together. It was conceived as a work, and it was finished as a work. And so this is the same thing. And I can't say that there was much sign of an improvement over the years, the almost 30 years separating these, but I would be curious to hear what some external source had to say comparing the books. I had a couple of reviews of this, and that's it for the big number of books. So you've got this set. You've got. Let's see if I can do this in a way that you can see it. You've got this set. Oh, no, that's not right. That's not right. I wanted to show you, what did I say? There was another one that was just assorted poems put together. Oh, well, as opposed to a dedicated theme. Well, I won't even try to do that. I think I've said enough about each one. I can't imagine anybody has stayed this far, and then I will just show you what's left of the leavings. I'd put out a couple of chapbooks. This contains a poem that I wrote for the election of Barack Obama. It was not originally titled this, but with each subsequent election, I think, or there's a poem in here from that's also included in The Soul's Refinement, which has to do with presidential inaugural themes. And then after the election of Donald Trump, I wrote some kind of thing. And so there's just scattered poems, probably 4 poems at best, and then some prose writing to support it. With the postage you'd wind up paying, it would be absurd to buy something like this on its own. And then this is just another thing that you're at the site, you're working, and you thought, well, I'll just throw some things together. And so this is just another chapbook of 14 poems. Very short, all of a piece, so to speak. And then I will link the Lulu site, since the majority of the poems are there, and you can see all of these Lulu titles there. But I put one of my plays up. Now, this is probably also not a place that you would start. It's a retelling of the famous Peony Pavilion. It's probably an unmountable play because it would take 18 hours. But then so did the original. However, the original, they would not, except in 2003 or 2004, I think, in Charleston. It's not the sort of thing that the original even that was ever performed from head to tail. The way operas have traditionally been done in China has been excerpts will be taken out and they'll be performed, but not the whole work. The presentation in Charleston may well have been the very first time, may well have been the very last time that has happened. And I liked so much the idea of doing a long form play, and I just had no story that was accessible to me. And so I just decided to retell the story, but I don't think it's going to be a very easy read either. So these are the three big things that if you don't have some kind, and besides, it's just reading a play. And then just to show you what else I have up there, there's a book of so-called literary criticism. It would be, there are books that I wrote that are not represented by my published stuff. It would be my 3rd book of prose, and largely it just takes stuff that was at my blog. I also had a couple or a few pieces published at different sites online, and so I put those in there too. The prose done by poets is notoriously poor. There have been exceptions, William Shakespeare for one, Matthew Arnold, T.S. Eliot for others, but I also would not recommend that. At this point, by some of these covers, Lulu had stopped allowing for that format, so I just took photos, and I thought this was kind of fun. You were so incredibly limited, and I am not a designer by any means. A designer would have scoffed at the cover builder at the website. I mean, just unbelievably how poor your options are at Lulu.com, and then how poor the follow through is. So I try, as I say, to avoid the site. I don't know if this really resolves much for you. I will again advise probably that if you are looking to, well, I guess I've separated everything out at this point. Look at those early books. You can find them easily at any of these at Abe Books or Amazon, particularly if you put the press name. My press was called Non-Fit Press. And I did do a fair amount of work for a period of time, probably like 5 years, and just decided that that was not where it was at. I have quite a, let me put them all back, copious amount of stuff that I wrote. I've been very lucky. Ultimately, in the end, it's all going to be lost. That is the way of things human, and we know that. But I have at least a personal legacy in that I saw a road carved out before me in potentiality, and I was able to walk through it to completion, meaning the last book of sonnets. Not everything in life happens so fortuitously. At one time, I was wanting to play guitar, and I was dedicating myself to the task, and then I suffered an injury to the arm, and the arm for most of my life since then has not been what I would like, and needless to say, it's not something that I can do. Unfortunately, life works out that way. So I have been blessed, and I invite you to go to the whatever link I happen to put. And if you have a question about anything else that might tip the balance as far as this or that, feel free. But you probably won't. You know, the shipping with Lulu is more than you want to pay. At least if you go with the older books from Amazon, and I think you probably can still find those there. At least you probably don't have the shipping to deal with. I mean, you know, these self-pub houses are all pretty rip-offy to begin with. I will leave that there. It is an indulgence and a vanity, perhaps, but I am very aware of a lot of people on YouTube that are striving to learn how to write, striving to put together a manuscript, and there are a lot of people advising them, and I was just very lucky that I got through all that and have this at least to show for it, even though it will all be scattered. Come here. Well, he doesn't want me to. Here, let me just show you what we have here. Okay, there we go. And this this really is where life lies anyhow, not in all of that fraudulent stuff, if you will. I mean, the stuff of words really is ephemeral. Of course, fleeting moments are ephemeral, but at this point, I think I prefer to spend time with what is real, although YouTube videos are ephemeral too. Everything is ephemeral, pardon me. So you wind up with this. Some people are disgusted by that kind of thing. Thank you for stopping by my channel.